Nobody warned me this is what flying would feel like now. Not the obvious kind of work, not lifting bags or walking long terminals. I mean the quiet kind. The kind where your brain never really gets to rest. The kind where you're constantly monitoring, adjusting, double-checking, and bracing without ever being told that's what you're supposed to be doing. I didn't notice it all at once. It crept in slowly, trip by trip. At first I thought I was just having an off day. Then I thought maybe airports were more crowded. Then I wondered if I was just getting less patient. But eventually it became impossible to ignore. Flying didn't feel the way it used to, even when everything technically went right. That realization didn't come during a meltdown or a major delay. It came on a perfectly normal travel day. Welcome to Passport Pointers, where we turn quiet travel confusion into clarity and explain the patterns airlines never spell out. And today, I want to talk about what flying actually feels like now, and why so many travelers sense the change but struggle to explain it. The strange thing is, nothing was wrong with that trip. The flight left on time, security moved, the plane landed exactly when it said it would, and yet by the time I reached the gate, I felt worn down in a way that had nothing to do with flying itself. The exhaustion came from vigilance, from watching clocks, scanning screens, listening for announcements, and constantly recalculating what might change next. Flying now demands supervision. You monitor delays before they exist. You plan backup plans you hope not to use. You hold your place in lines while tracking gates, boarding groups, and overhead space. The journey is no longer passive, it's managed. At some point, air travel stopped being about moving through space and became about managing uncertainty. Nothing dramatic happened, but nothing felt settled either. You arrive safely, mentally spent from the constant awareness that follows you through the entire. You supervise your booking to make sure the fare didn't quietly change rules after purchase. You supervise your seat assignment because it can disappear or be reassigned without warning. You supervise baggage rules that vary by fare, route, and aircraft. You supervise your boarding group, watching the line form early so you don't lose overhead space. You supervise gate changes, app notifications, and screen updates that don't always agree with each other. Even when everything technically works, you're still on alert. You're listening for announcements that may or may not apply to you. You're checking the app just in case. You're mentally confirming that the plan you made weeks ago still exists in the system as you understood it. That vigilance is the real workload. Flying now requires attention, anticipation, and constant verification. It's not dramatic stress, it's low-level monitoring that never shuts off. And that's what's new. The journey didn't get harder because something broke. It got harder because you became responsible for making sure nothing does. There was a time when flying felt more passive. You showed up, followed signs, listened for your row to be called, and trusted that the system would carry you forward. You might wait, you might be delayed, but you weren't expected to predict problems before they happened or manage contingencies on your own. That expectation has quietly changed. Now you're expected to anticipate tight connections, watch weather in other cities, understand fare rules, and react faster than the system explains itself. If something goes wrong, the assumption is that you'll already know what to do next. What makes this shift unsettling is that no one announced it. Airlines didn't say, "You're now the backup plan." The responsibility just migrated from the system to the passenger. One app notification, one policy change, one unstaffed desk at a time. Flying didn't become chaotic overnight, it became conditional. It works smoothly only if you stay engaged, informed, and ready to intervene. Trust wasn't removed, it was replaced with vigilance. Somewhere along the line, flying quietly became a test of awareness. You're expected to know things before they're announced, to notice changes before they matter, to interpret emails, apps, and signs that don't always agree. Information exists, but it's fragmented, conditional, and easy to miss if you aren't actively hunting for it. Miss a gate change and the system doesn't slow down. Overlook a boarding rule buried in fine print and the response isn't sympathy, it's consequence. There's an unspoken assumption that you are watching closely enough, refreshing often enough, reading carefully enough. When something goes wrong, the reaction feels less like help and more like indifference. You should have known. That emotional shift matters. Flying used to ask for patience, now it asks for vigilance. The contract changed, and the discomfort isn't about delays or crowds. It's about being held responsible for a system that no longer guides you. What makes this version of flying so draining is that the work is invisible. You don't get credit for it, and most of the time you don't even realize you're doing it. It's not physical effort, so it doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, until you suddenly feel worn out without knowing why. You can sit in a gate area for an hour and feel more tired than after walking an entire terminal. That's because your body is still, but your mind isn't. You're listening for announcements that may or may not apply to you. You're watching the gate agent's movements for clues. You're refreshing the app just in case. You're scanning the crowd to see if boarding has started without a clear announcement. None of that looks like effort, but it is. You're not resting, you're monitoring. And modern air travel has turned waiting into a task that requires constant attention whether you want it to or not. At some point during that trip, I remember thinking, why does this feel heavier than it used to? Not worse, just heavier. As if every step carried extra mental weight. It isn't that airports got louder, it's that your brain has to filter more noise. It isn't that schedules got tighter, it's that the margin for error shrank without explanation. It isn't that planes got smaller, it's that every choice now feels consequential. Even buying a ticket feels different. You're not selecting a flight so much as selecting a rule set, a level of forgiveness, a degree of flexibility. Each option quietly defines how much trouble you can absorb later. Those consequences don't appear at checkout. They surface mid-journey when plans wobble and options narrow. By then, the weight you felt has a name. It's responsibility. And it arrives after commitment, not before. That shift changes how flying feels now. That delayed cost is a big part of why flying feels more demanding now. You're carrying future risk the entire time, even if nothing ever triggers it. Your mind is holding contingency plans in the background, quietly budgeting stress for problems that may never arrive. That alone is tiring. And here's the part nobody says out loud. Flying now requires emotional regulation. You're expected to stay calm in environments designed to rush you. You're nudged toward fast decisions with incomplete information and then judged for choosing poorly. You're asked to be patient while the system moves ahead without checking if you're still with it. That's not just logistics, that's emotional work. It's managing frustration without visible outlets, keeping composure in crowded spaces, and staying polite while feeling sidelined. None of this is acknowledged, yet it's treated as normal behavior. What changed isn't just the process. It's the expectation that passengers will absorb pressure quietly, regulate themselves constantly, and treat that effort as the baseline. That's a heavy load to normalize. One of the most unsettling realizations is that this extra effort isn't tied to a single failure. It's baked into the design. The systems are optimized for efficiency and revenue, not cognitive ease. Everything is a little tighter, a little louder, a little faster. And those small shifts compound in ways you don't notice immediately. You don't feel it on the first decision, or the second. But by the 10th micro-choice, where to stand, when to move, what to watch, which rule applies now, your brain is finished. The fatigue arrives without drama, just a quiet sense that you're depleted. Because none of this is labeled as work, people turn it inward. They assume they're less patient, less adaptable, older. But the environment changed, the load increased, the traveler didn't suddenly become fragile. Flying didn't become unsafe or chaotic, it became cognitively expensive. And that cost is paid silently by the person navigating it. You're constantly paying attention in small increments. Is this my boarding group? Is that bag size acceptable today? Is this line forming for a reason or just out of habit? Is my gate still correct? Should I move closer now or wait? Each question is minor on its own, barely worth noticing. But together, they create a steady cognitive drain that never quite shuts off. What makes it heavier is that there's no clear off switch. Even once you're seated, the monitoring continues. Will the overhead bins fill before my row boards? Will someone need my seat for a swap? Will the connection hold if we land a few minutes late? Will the app update mid-flight with new instructions I'll have to act on immediately? None of this is dramatic. It's persistent. The brain stays half engaged the entire time, scanning for risk, watching for changes, staying ready. That constant readiness is what wears people down, long before the plane ever takes off. You're never fully done until you're off the plane and out of the airport. Until then, part of your attention stays engaged, scanning for the next thing that could change. That's why so many travelers arrive feeling oddly depleted, even after short flights. It isn't the distance traveled, it's the sustained vigilance required the entire time. The system doesn't recognize that cost because it doesn't measure it. Airlines track on-time performance, load factors, and revenue per seat. They don't track how mentally demanding the journey feels or how much attention it consumes. There's no metric for cognitive fatigue, so there's no operational incentive to reduce it. Instead, efficiency becomes the goal. More automation, tighter timing, fewer pauses. From a spreadsheet perspective, that looks like progress. From a passenger perspective, it feels like pressure. Once you understand that gap, a lot of frustrations start to make sense. The exhaustion isn't personal, it's structural, and it's the result of a system optimized for movement, not mental rest. The reason help feels harder to access isn't that people stopped caring. It's that the system now expects passengers to manage themselves. Desks disappeared. Staff was centralized. Apps replaced conversations. Responsibility didn't vanish, it was redistributed. And most of it landed on the traveler. Instructions feel vague because flexibility has been pushed downstream. Instead of being told what will happen, you're given options and expected to choose correctly. Everything is framed as optional, but every option carries risk. Choose wrong and the system doesn't correct you. It assumes you accepted the outcome. Flying didn't become worse by accident. It became more self-service. From the provider side, that looks efficient. Fewer touch points, fewer exceptions, more scalability. From the passenger side, it feels like being handed a complex machine with minimal instructions and being told it's intuitive. Self-service always creates this gap. It simplifies operations by transferring effort, and that effort doesn't disappear. It shows up as mental load, uncertainty, and the quiet sense that you're on your own, even when everything is technically working. The moment I stopped taking it personally, flying became easier. Not because the system changed, but because my expectations did. I stopped expecting the journey to carry me. I started treating it like something I had to actively navigate, the way you would a crowded city instead of a guided tour. That shift doesn't remove the effort, it removes the surprise. And surprise is what drains you fastest. When you expect ease and get friction, every obstacle feels like a failure. When you expect effort, the same obstacles feel manageable, even predictable. Once you know the work is coming, you can pace yourself. You can decide where to spend energy and where not to. You can ignore the things that don't matter and focus on the ones that do. Most importantly, you stop blaming yourself for feeling tired before the plane even takes off. The fatigue wasn't weakness, it was unacknowledged labor. Seeing that clearly doesn't make flying relaxing again, but it does make it honest. And honesty is lighter than confusion. Because the truth is, flying now asks more of you than it used to. Not physically, mentally. The walking, the standing, the sitting are all manageable. It's the thinking that wears you down, the constant monitoring, the low-level stress of staying ready in case something changes without warning. Your brain is working the entire time, even when nothing goes wrong. That effort doesn't show up in distance traveled or hours flown, but it shows up in how you feel when you arrive, drained, short-tempered, wondering why a routine trip felt heavier than expected. Once you recognize that cost, the experience makes more sense. You stop measuring fatigue by miles and start recognizing it as mental labor. That awareness doesn't fix the system, but it explains your reaction to it. If you want more Passport Pointers videos that put words to the parts of travel that feel off but are hard to explain, watch the next video that's popping up on your screen right now. Thanks for watching Passport Pointers, and I'll see you in the next video.